Hi, my name is Dale Comstock. In this segment, I'm going to talk about ballistic wounding factors for survival. Basically, what do bullets do when they enter a body? And hopefully, I'll give you a better appreciation or understanding what you hear terms like knockdown power and things like that. Well, it's really not knockdown power. A bullet really doesn't knock you down. It doesn't have that kind of mass to it to do that. People fall down or die for a couple of reasons, and I'm going to explain that here in a little bit more
So
detail.
that's what we're going to talk about today. Ballistic wounding factors. How do you kill people? The surest way to cause rapid death is basically collapse the central nervous system in a person. What that means when I say central nervous system, it's either a shot to the brain or to the top of the spinal cord and top of the neck, basically severing the brain stem. Aside of that, the only other way to stop them is to cause rapid bleeding and drop the blood pressure, what I call the hydraulic system. So what's central to killing a person, really, at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is stop brain function. And you can do it by a direct shot to the brain or to the top of the spine, or you're going to have to do it through the hemohydraulic system. And what's going to be the key factor here is how fast can you basically engage brain death? How fast can you make that brain stop? So if you shoot a person, for example, in the heart, and the heart stops bleeding, pretty good chance that there's enough oxygen in the blood where that person can basically continue to fight or continue to function, or maybe even just pull the trigger for another 10 seconds. Everybody's a little bit different. Some may be longer, some may be less time. So, that's the thing to consider when we take center mass shots and we're trying to disrupt blood vessels in major organs like the heart, for example. A person may not die right away, whereas a brain shot, pretty good chance that he's going to die instantly. So with that said, other factors we need to consider is, one, probably the most important factor is shot placement. Being able to either hit that brain, good luck on hitting the top of the neck every time, and then shooting or hitting the central mass or central portion of the body and hitting preferably major blood vessels or the heart and have that person bleed out. So what's important with besides shot placement and what supports that good shot placement? Several factors. One, first understand this: when a bullet enters the body, it's going to do two things. It's going to create a temporary wound channel or cavity and a permanent wound cavity, and that is basically the track that the bullet travels into the body. Now, it's commonly pretty universally accepted that the bullet needs to travel about 10 inches into a body to basically kill somebody, or at least create enough damage where they're going to eventually die or be mortally wounded. With the exception, of course, if I shoot you in the brain or I shoot you in the spinal cord or something like that, or even in the heart, it's going to go through the heart because the heart's not buried 10 inches in. But a torso shot or abdominal shots, you need to at least get 10 inches of that cavitation through there. So backing up a little bit, when that round goes through and it creates that cavity, that wound channel through the body, basically you have what's called a permanent wound channel and a temporary wound channel. The permanent is basically where the flesh or the tissue collapses back on itself as the bullet's traveling through on its path through the body, through its trajectory. The permanent wound channel is basically the cavity that's left that doesn't close on itself and remains expanded, which is really what's important, because when you have that open space, blood flows into it and it doesn't coagulate as quickly, and the person more likely going to be incapacitated. Whereas if the temporary wound channel or the wound channel, permanent wound channel, continues to close up, what happens is it basically constricts itself, and it's almost like sealing the leak from within. So those are considerations. So what creates a permanent wound channel versus a temporary wound channel? Basically the bullet. What does the bullet do, especially when it starts penetrating? Does it start to deform as it's traveling through the cavity? Like, for example, a hollow point. Okay, it tends to mushroom out, has a bigger surface area on the front of the bullet. As it's traveling, it's creating a wider swath, tearing through more flesh and tissue, which doesn't allow it to close up as readily on the back side. So when we're talking about the wound channel, whether it's a temporary or permanent cavity, the next thing we need to consider is the bullet. All right, and what's important about the bullet? There's always this dialectic out there about 9 millimeter versus 45. Which one's better? Better. Well, what I just said a minute ago, what's really important is shot placement. It doesn't matter if you shoot somebody with a 22 or 45. If you put the round in the right place, the central nervous system, for example, the heart, you can kill somebody just as easily with a 22 as you could with a 45 or a shotgun slug. But when you talk about the bullets for the bullet characteristics, what's important? There's no one characteristic more important than the other, but the three are bullet construction. What is the bullet made out of? Is it made out of all lead? Is it made out of lead with a copper jacket, a partial copper jacket? Does it have a tungsten core in it? Or is it made of some other type of material? Is it made out of brass or copper, blah, 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 silver? And then we talk about the shape of the bullet. Is it round nose lead, round nose copper jacket bullet? Is it a flat nose? Is it a hollow point? There's so many different configurations, right? The bullet itself, because the bullet shape affects things like, first of all, aerodynamics, as well as once it enters the body, how does it perform inside the body, and what is it going to do at that point? Whereas the construction of the bullet comes into play once it enters the body, or does it pass through something before it hits the body, like, for example, clothing, car door, or window? What is the bullet going to do, and how is it going to react once it makes impact? Some bullets will stay intact. Some bullets are designed to be frangible, where they come apart. Some are designed to mushroom out. They all have different characteristics. So we've got bullet construction that we're concerned with, bullet shape that we're concerned with, and finally, the last one, probably the most important of those three, is velocity. How fast does that bullet travel? So, you could have a 22, or for example, I'll use the 5.56 round, right? In the AR-15 M4 platforms, M16 platforms. That's a very small bullet, just bigger, the size of a 22 basically. But because it's traveling so fast, it's going to penetrate deeper into the body, creating more damage along the way. Whereas a bigger, heavier bullet, like for example a 45 copper jacketed ball, 230 grain, traveling at about 830 feet per second muzzle velocity, is going to go into the body. It's going to create a big hole in the outset, right? But it's not going to travel as far. But it's going to create a bigger permanent wounding channel up front, which could be pretty devastating. But it's not going to get the depth of penetration. Whereas that 223 round or that 5.56 is going to be zinging along at 2,500 feet per second, plus or minus, almost 4 times, almost 3 times the speed of that 45 round entering the body. It's going to travel a lot deeper. The wound channel will be smaller, but it'll be longer. So what it lacks in diameter, it makes up in length, so to speak, if you're tracking with me. So all these, there's all these variables, 9 millimeter versus 45 versus 22. Really has to depend on the bullet construction, bullet shape, and the speed of the bullet. And you can change all the variables, right? You can get in fact, I work for a company now that's designed a 45 bullet that comes out of the muzzle at 1,200 feet per second. That's huge, but it weighs a lot less. It's a 168 grain bullet, but it travels faster and it penetrates deeper, and it's actually more lethal than the 230 grain bullet. So, but what they've compromised on was the weight of the bullet. They've added, they didn't add anything. They're using less powder to push that lighter bullet, so it can still go faster. But the weight of the bullet, again, the construction of the bullet is designed so that when it penetrates, it does maximum amount of damage as it's going into the body. So there's a lot of different characteristics with this particular design. And I won't bore you to death with it now, but later on, I'll address this particular bullet that I represent for this company. But so the other consideration is hydrostatic shock or hydrodynamic damage. And basically what that means is when that bullet is going into the tissue and it's traveling, what's happening is it's creating a shock wave in and around that bullet as it's traveling. It's pushing a fluid shock wave, if you will. Body's mostly made of fluid and tissue, but mostly fluid. And as that bullet smacks that tissue and is traveling through there, it's almost like a ripple in a pond. You're getting this vibration, this energy traveling away from the bullet, propagating through the flesh, propagating through the nervous system. And basically what it's doing is it's creating more damage to blood vessels and the nervous system that also is a variable depending on the bullet. And the bullets that cause the most hydrostatic shock are bullets that travel over 1,300 feet per second, especially the 223 type bullet. That thing's zinging right along. So it does a lot of damage, not just because it has a long wound channel that it's traveling, but also because of the hydrostatic shock that's creating on the front end of that bullet. It's creating more tissue expansion along the way, causing a tissue to slap together or just remain open as a bullet's penetrating through and pushing through. So that's another factor, is the hydrostatic, the hydrodynamic or hydrostatic characteristic or shock of the bullet. So lastly, in sum, we're looking at, combination of factors. Most important in my mind, in my opinion, is one, shot placement. A shot to the brain trumps any other shot, regardless of what caliber you have. It's going to kill. But, being pragmatic, most people can't take a headshot under stress, especially outside of maybe 10 meters. So, the most practical thing to do is take a center mass shot, aim for the hydraulics, and try to shut down the hydraulics, bearing in mind that that person's not going to die, may not die right away. Again, everybody's a little bit different. And then with all that said, things to consider is the bullet shape, bullet construction, bullet velocity. And based off of bullet velocity, you're looking at the effect of hydrostatic shock as well. So there's all these different combinations that come together, but really it comes down to bullet penetration, cavitation. How well does that bullet travel into the body, and what is it doing when it's going through the body? Is it creating a hole? Is it allowing blood to flow freely and drop the blood pressure in the body? Of course, if it's shooting in the brain, it doesn't matter. It's just going to scramble the brain anyway. So those are some things to think about. And next time you go to the range, when you're shooting your targets, think about, what you're shooting at and what the effect is going to be. And basically, there's three places that I aim for on the body. The center mass, obviously, I'm going to try to hit the chest, the heart, the major blood vessels that are stemming from the heart. I'm going to aim for the pelvic area. Pelvic area has a lot of blood vessels in there, and a good shot to the pelvic area can kill just as easily. You got major blood vessels, femoral arteries, things like that. They're branching off from the pelvic area. Then just the pelvic area in itself is very vascular, so it's a good target. And of course, the last one, which I'll probably shoot at in the last place, is the head, because it's such a small target and it's always moving. It's like trying to shoot a plate, a moving plate, and you know how hard that is. And further it moves back or away from you, and it's an up and down. It becomes a very difficult target to shoot. So think about that on the range next time you're shooting, and hopefully that gives you a little bit better idea about what your bullet's going to do to people and what you're shooting for.